The town of Makutano was always alive. In the morning, the streets were crowded with people rushing to work, matetas hooting, market women shouting the prices of tomatoes, and boda weaving through the traffic like ants in a hurry. It was a place where dreams and struggles mixed together every day. Lydia was one of those dreamers. She was only 22, but life had already shown her many hardships. Every morning she tied her hair in a neat bun, put on her worn-out black shoes, and walked to the small hotel where she worked. The hotel was noisy, always filled with customers who wanted tea, chapati, and mandotsi. Lydia worked hard, carrying trays and wiping tables. Her boss was harsh, always shouting, and sometimes trying to touch her in ways that made her uncomfortable. But Lydia endured it because she had no choice. Her mother was sick at home, and the little money Lydia earned was what kept them alive. On the other side of town, a man called Otieno started his day differently. He was a taxi driver, not the proud kind with a big car, but the struggling kind with an old, dusty Toyota that coughed smoke whenever he pressed the accelerator. He drove from morning until late at night, picking passengers from the bus stage, dropping them in the estates, and waiting outside nightclubs for customers who staggered home drunk. Otieno was a quiet man. People saw him as simple and hardworking, but deep inside he carried a secret. Years ago, before he became a driver, he had been involved in something dark, something he never spoke about. And sometimes, when he was alone, he feared the past would one day return to haunt him. Not far from them was Mwikali, a teacher in one of the public schools in Makutano. She was respected, strict, and always walked with dignity. She lived in a small house near the school with a child everyone believed was her son. The child was about 7 years old, playful and bright, and Mwikali loved him dearly. But there was a secret she had kept for many years. That child was not hers. No one in the town knew where he truly came from, and Mwikali intended to keep it that way. Then there was Karanja. Unlike the others, Karanja lived in luxury. He owned tall buildings in town, expensive cars, and even sponsored football tournaments for the youth. People called him Meshimiwa, then praised him for his donations to churches and schools. Whenever he passed, people greeted him with respect. But what the public did not know was that Karanja's wealth had been built on lies, corruption, and betrayal. Behind his smile was a dangerous man who crushed anyone that stood in his way. For different people, living in the same town, walking the same dusty streets, but each carrying their own struggles and secrets. At this time, none of them knew how their lives would one day connect in ways that would shock the entire town of Makutano. One hot afternoon, Lydia was working in the hotel as usual. The place was crowded, the smell of fried onions filling the air. She moved quickly between the tables, her tray heavy with plates of ugali and sukuma wiki. That was when a tall man in a fine suit walked in. Everyone turned to look, because not many rich people came to eat in such a simple hotel. It was Karanja. He sat at a corner table, his gold watch shining under the dim lights. Lydia went to serve him, her hands shaking slightly because she knew who he was. Everyone in Makutano knew Karanja. He ordered food in a polite voice, and as Lydia placed the plate in front of him, he looked at her closely. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lydia," she answered softly. "You work very hard," Karanja said with a smile. "A girl like you should not be here serving tea. You deserve a better life." Lydia did not know what to say. She simply nodded and walked away, but in her heart, she felt uneasy. She had seen how men like him behaved with young girls. That same evening, Otieno was at the bus stage waiting for customers. His old taxi was dusty, and he leaned on the door, tired but patient. Just then, Karanja came walking with 2 bodyguards. He waved at Otieno's car. "Driver, I need a quick ride." Otieno opened the door and Karanja entered. The ride was silent at first, but when they reached the big gates of Karanja's mansion, he stepped out quickly, leaving his briefcase on the back seat. Otieno called after him, but the guards pushed him away. "Go," they shouted. Otieno drove off, confused. When he opened the briefcase, his heart almost stopped. Inside were bundles of money neatly tied together, and documents full of strange names and numbers. For a moment, Otieno's mind raced. This money could solve his problems, his son's school fees, his rent, even his old car could be replaced. But the documents worried him. One of them had a name written in bold letters. A name from his past. Meanwhile, Mwikali was preparing her lesson notes at school. She had just had the news that their school would soon receive donations for new classrooms. The donor's name? Karanja. The teachers were excited, saying it was a blessing. But Mwikali's heart felt heavy. She had seen that name before. Long ago, when she took in the child she was raising, Karanja's name had been whispered by someone she trusted. Could it be a coincidence? And so, in the busy town of Makutano, their paths began to cross. Lydia had caught Karanja's eye. Otieno now held his secrets in a forgotten briefcase, when Mwikali was about to face memories she had buried for years. None of them knew that these small moments would soon change everything in their lives. That night, Lydia went home tired from work. She found her mother sitting on the old wooden chair, coughing softly. Lydia quickly prepared porridge and gave it to her. As they sat together in the dim light of the kerosene lamp, her mother began to speak in a weak voice. "Lydia, there is something I must tell you before it is too late," she said. Lydia looked at her with worry. "Mama, don't speak like that. You will be fine." But her mother shook her head. "You have grown into a strong young woman. You must know the truth. Do you remember your father?" Lydia was silent for a moment. She barely remembered him. He had died when she was just a child. Her mother continued, "Your father once worked for a man in this town. A rich man. He discovered something, documents that showed the man was stealing from the people. When he tried to speak out, he died suddenly. They told me it was an accident, but I knew the truth. That man, his name was Karanja." Lydia's heart pounded. Karanja. The same man who had eaten at the hotel and looked at her with interest. The same man everyone in town praised. She felt anger rising inside her, but she stayed quiet, holding her mother's hand tightly. Meanwhile, Otieno could not sleep. The briefcase sat on the floor of his small house, the money shining in the weak bulb light. He opened the documents again. One file had names and dates. And then, one line caught his eye. His own name. Written clearly, with a date from many years ago. His face turned pale. He remembered that night long ago, the night he had been desperate, the night he had done something terrible. He had thought no one knew, but here it was, written in Karanja's files. Somehow, Karanja had discovered his secret. Otieno closed the briefcase and locked it under his bed. But his hands were shaking. If Karanja came looking for it, what would he do? At the same time, Mwikali was walking home from school with the little boy she raised. He was cheerful, skipping along the dusty road, holding her hand. But Mwikali's heart was troubled. When she had taken him in years ago, it had been under strange circumstances. A woman she once knew had left the baby at her doorstep, saying she could no longer keep him. That woman had whispered one name before she disappeared, Karanja. Mwikali had never told anyone. She raised the boy as her own, loving him with all her heart. But now, with Karanja donating to her school, she felt the past creeping closer. What if someone discovered the truth? What if the boy was connected to him in a way she could not explain? That night, as the town of Makutano grew quiet, 3 people lay awake, Lydia, Otieno, and Mwikali, each holding a secret that pointed back to the same man. And in his mansion on the hill, Karanja sipped his expensive whiskey, smiling as if he had nothing to hide. He had no idea that the people he had once stepped on were slowly circling back into his life. Days passed, but Lydia could not stop thinking about her mother's words. Every time she saw Karanja passing in his shiny car, anger burned inside her. Yet, she also remembered how he had looked at her in the hotel. She knew men like him could destroy lives, but they could also lift people from poverty. That thought disturbed her, because deep down, she wanted a better life for herself and her sick mother. One evening, as she was leaving work, she found a black car waiting outside. The driver opened the door, and there he was, Karanja. "Lydia," he said warmly, "let me take you home. You should not be walking at this hour." Lydia hesitated, but the eyes of her fellow workers were on her. She entered the car, her heart beating fast. As they drove, Karanja spoke gently, promising to help her with money given to pay for her college fees. Lydia listened quietly, but inside, she was torn. Could she accept help from the very man who might have killed her father? At the same time, Otieno's nightmare came true. Two of Karanja's guards appeared at his taxi stage. They asked about a forgotten briefcase. Otieno pretended he knew nothing, but his voice shook. The guards looked at him sharply, warning him that the boss does not tolerate dishonesty. That night, Otieno sat in his small room, staring at the briefcase. He wanted to throw it away, but he also knew it held proof of Karanja's corruption. It was dangerous, but it was also his only weapon if Karanja ever turned against him. Meanwhile, Mwikali's life took an unexpected turn. During a staff meeting, the head teacher announced that Karanja himself would be visiting the school to inspect the new project he was funding. The teachers clapped, but Mwikali's hands froze. If Karanja saw the boy she was raising, would he recognize him? Would he claim him? The day of the visit arrived. The school was decorated, the pupils sang songs, then Karanja arrived in his big car. He smiled at everyone, shaking hands. When his eyes landed on the little boy standing next to Mwikali, something strange happened. For just a second, his smile faded. His eyes narrowed. Mwikali felt her knees weaken. Later that evening, Karanja sent one of his men to her house. The man told her politely that the Meshimiwa wanted to know more about the boy. Mwikali lied, saying the boy was her late sister's child. The man only nodded, but Mwikali could see doubt in his eyes. And so the lines began to cross, Lydia caught between temptation and revenge, Otieno holding onto a secret that could destroy them all, and Mwikali living in fear that the child she raised would be taken away. In the shadows of the town, Karanja pulled the strings, unaware that the very people he thought were powerless were slowly uniting against him, though not by choice. The town of Makutano was restless. Whispers about Karanja had started spreading, though no one could prove anything. Lydia had grown quieter at work, Otieno became more nervous at the taxi stage, and Mwikali kept the boy close, fearing someone might come to take him. One night, everything began to unravel. Lydia had agreed to meet Karanja for dinner. She told herself it was only to get help for her sick mother, but deep down, she wanted to confront him about her father. They met at an expensive hotel. Karanja smiled warmly, pouring her juice and promising to change her life. But Lydia leaned forward and asked quietly, "Do you remember a man who worked for you long ago?" "My father. He died suddenly. My mother told me you were the reason." Karanja froze, his smile fading. Then he laughed softly. "Child, the past is full of stories. People die for many reasons. Do not believe everything you hear." Lydia's hands shook under the table. She wanted to shout at him, but she kept silent. She realized Karanja would never admit anything. He was too powerful, too careful. That same night, Otieno was driving home when a car blocked his way. Two guards stepped out. "The boss wants his briefcase," one of them said coldly. Otieno's mind raced. If he returned it, Karanja might kill him to keep him silent. If he refused, they would kill him anyway. So he made a bold move. He said, "Tell your boss that I will return the briefcase only if he meets me himself." Man to man. The guards exchanged looks, then drove off. Otieno's heart pounded. He had just declared war on a man who controlled the whole town. Meanwhile, Mwikali received a visitor she had feared. A woman she hadn't seen in years appeared at her doorstep. Her face was older, her eyes tired, but Mwikali recognized her immediately, the woman who had left the baby with her long ago. The woman whispered urgently, "That boy, he is not safe. He is Karanja's blood. If he discovers the truth, he will take him away. Protect him, Mwikali. Protect him with your life." Mwikali's knees weakened. Her worst fear was true. The child she loved as her own was the son of the very man who had ruined so many lives. The next day, all three, Lydia, Otieno, and Mwikali, found themselves caught in Karanja's net. Lydia received gifts from him, but in her heart, she burned with hatred. Otieno prepared himself for the dangerous meeting he had demanded. And Mwikali prayed that no one would discover the child's true father. But fate had already tied them together. Their stories were no longer separate. And when the collision finally came, it would shake the entire town of Makutano. The meeting between Otieno and Karanja was set in a small club on the edge of town. Otieno arrived early, the briefcase locked in his car boot. His palms were sweaty, but he stood tall. When Karanja finally walked in, surrounded by two guards, the whole club went silent. Otieno forced a smile. "Boss, I have your briefcase. But I also know what is inside. Money, names, even mine." Karanja's smile was slow and cold. "You think you can threaten me? That briefcase is nothing. I own this town, and I own men like you." Before Otieno could reply, Lydia stormed into the club. She had followed Karanja, determined to confront him. When she saw Otieno, she froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Otieno looked away. "Trying to survive," he muttered. Karanja laughed. "Look at this. A poor girl and a poor driver, both trying to fight me. Do you know who you are dealing with?" But then the door opened again. Mwikali stepped in, holding the little boy by the hand. The club went dead silent. The child's eyes, wide and innocent, looked exactly like Karanja's when he was young. Karanja's smile disappeared. He stood up slowly, his voice trembling for the first time. Where did you get this child?" Mwikali's voice was steady. "He is yours. The son you abandoned. The son you wanted the world to forget." Gasps filled the room. Even the guards looked shaken. Lydia's hands trembled. "So it's true. You destroyed my father's life, and now you hide even your own blood." Karanja's face hardened. "Enough. This is my town. You think anyone will believe you? Otieno is a criminal. Lydia is just a poor waitress. Mwikali is a liar. And this child," he pointed with shaking hands, "this child is nothing without me." But before he could finish, Otieno stepped forward. "No, Meshimiwa. The people will believe, because I still have the briefcase. Your secrets, your corruption, it's all there. You cannot silence all of us." Karanja's guards shifted nervously, unsure what to do. For the first time, Karanja looked cornered. His eyes darted from Lydia, to Otieno, to Mwikali, then finally to the child who stared at him with innocent confusion. Then something unexpected happened. The boy pulled free from Mwikali's hand and walked toward Karanja. He looked up and said softly, "Are you my father?" The room went still. Karanja's mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment, his power, his wealth, his threats, none of it mattered. He was just a man facing the truth he had run from for years. But then, without warning, he turned and walked out. His guards followed, leaving behind silence and shock. The next day, rumors spread across Makutano. Some said Karanja had fled the country. Others whispered he was still around, pulling strings from the shadows. But one thing was clear, his empire was shaking. Lydia returned to her sick mother with renewed strength. Otieno finally confessed his past crime to Mwikali, and together they agreed to protect the boy. Mwikali remained firm, raising the child as her own, but now with Lydia and Otieno beside her. As for Karanja, no one knew where he went. Some believed he would return. Others swore he had disappeared forever. But in the streets of Makutano, people began to talk openly. They no longer looked at him as a hero, but as a man with blood on his hands. And yet, the biggest question remained unanswered: would the boy grow up to follow in his father's footsteps, or would he become the one to finally break the curse of Karanja's name? No one could predict.